Bennett Hartwell is kneeling in the frozen mulch beside the east entrance of the Pemberton Properties corporate campus at 6:47 on a Thursday morning in late October, his calloused hands working a pair of hedge clippers through a row of boxwoods that have grown wild over the weekend, when his son Sawyer tugs on the sleeve of his green groundskeeper jacket and holds up the leather sketchbook, the one with the cracked spine and the coffee stain on the cover, open to a drawing of a man stepping out of a black car. And Bennett looks at the drawing and then looks up, and there, not 30 feet away, a black limousine is pulling to the curb, and from the back seat emerges a tall man with silver-white hair, combed back, and a navy suit that probably costs more than Bennett makes in 3 months, and the man is walking directly toward them, and Sawyer is not moving. And Bennett's heart drops into his stomach because his son is standing right in the middle of the walkway. The man stops. His gray eyes flick down to the boy, then to the sketchbook, then to Bennett still on his knees in the dirt. "Whose child is this?" the man says, not unkindly, but not warmly either. The way you'd ask about a misplaced delivery. Bennett stands, brushes the mulch from his knees. "He's mine, sir. I'm sorry, Sawyer, come here, bud." But Sawyer doesn't move. He stands there, sketchbook open, looking up at the silver-haired man with those large brown eyes that have held 9 years of silence inside them. The alarm on Bennett's phone goes off at 4:50 a.m., and he kills it on the first buzz. Muscle memory. He hasn't needed an alarm in years, not really. His body wakes itself at 4:45 like clockwork, 5 minutes before the sound, as if even his subconscious knows that silence matters in this apartment. He lies still for a moment in the dark. The ceiling above him has a water stain shaped like a mitten. He's been meaning to talk to the landlord about it for 2 years. He won't. Bennett swings his legs over the edge of the bed and sits there, feet flat on the cold floor, hands on his knees. The apartment is a 2-bedroom in a building on Grover Street, the kind of building where the hallway smells like someone else's dinner and the elevator works on alternating Tuesdays. But it's theirs. The rent is manageable. The school bus stops at the corner. The neighbors are quiet. He moves through the kitchen without turning on the overhead light. The small lamp above the stove is enough, coffee maker on, bread in the toaster. He pulls Sawyer's lunchbox from the cabinet. It's blue with a faded astronaut on the front, a relic from a phase the boy went through 2 years ago when he'd filled an entire sketchbook with nothing but rockets and stars and the blackness between them. Bennett makes the sandwich the way Sawyer likes it. Peanut butter on both slices so the jelly doesn't make the bread soggy. Strawberry jam, crusts cut off with the old serrated knife that belonged to Bennett's mother. Apple slices in a small container with a squeeze of lemon so they don't brown. A granola bar, a juice box, and a note. He writes a note every day, has for 9 years. At first, they were long. Paragraphs of encouragement, explanations of the world, tiny love letters from a father to a son who wouldn't answer. Over the years, they've gotten shorter, not because Bennett has less to say, but because he's learned that Sawyer reads them in a single breath at the lunch table, folds them into small squares, and puts them in his jacket pocket. Every single one. Bennett found a shoebox under Sawyer's bed once, stuffed with hundreds of folded squares. He never mentioned it. Today's note says, "You see things other people miss. That's not a weakness. That's a superpower. Dad." He folds it twice and tucks it beside the granola bar. At 5:30, Bennett opens Sawyer's bedroom door. The room is small but organized. Sawyer is meticulous in a way that sometimes worries Bennett and sometimes fills him with admiration. The books on the shelf are arranged by color. The colored pencils in the mason jar on the desk are sorted by shade, light to dark, each one sharpened to the same precise point. The drawings taped to the wall above the bed are arranged in a grid, evenly spaced, each one a window into the world as Sawyer sees it. The boy is already awake. He's sitting cross-legged on the bed, sketchbook in his lap, drawing. His sandy brown hair falls over his forehead, and he doesn't push it away. His pencil moves in quick, certain strokes. He looks up when the door opens, and his eyes, large and brown, his mother's eyes exactly, meet Bennett's, and something passes between them that doesn't require sound. A recognition. A good morning, and I'm okay. "Hey, bud," Bennett says softly. "Breakfast is ready, toast and peanut butter." Sawyer holds up the sketchbook. It's a drawing of a bird on the fire escape outside his window, a sparrow rendered in graphite with a detail that would make an art professor pause, every feather accounted for. The eye of the bird is alive with light. "That's beautiful," Bennett says, and means it. "You can finish it after school." Sawyer nods. He closes the sketchbook, sets it on the nightstand, and swings his thin legs over the side of the bed. He's wearing pajamas with planets on them. He looks young for his age, the way only a kid who lives mostly in his own head can look, as if the outside world hasn't quite caught up to what's happening inside. They eat breakfast together at the kitchen table. Bennett talks. Sawyer listens. This is how it works and has worked for 9 years since the accident, since the silence fell like a curtain between the boy and the rest of the world. Bennett talks about the weather, about what he's planting at work this week, about the cardinal he saw yesterday near the parking garage. Sawyer eats his toast, drinks his orange juice, and occasionally taps the table twice, which means yes or I agree or keep going, depending on the context. 1 tap means no. 3 taps means I love you. Bennett learned these codes not from a therapist or a book, but from Sawyer himself, who invented them in the weeks after Elaine's funeral, when the silence was still new and terrifying, and neither of them knew yet that it would last. Elaine. Bennett doesn't say her name out loud anymore, not because it hurts too much. It does, but that's not why. He doesn't say it because Sawyer flinches when he hears it, a micro-movement so subtle that most people wouldn't catch it, but Bennett catches everything about his son the way a sailor reads the water. She died 9 years ago. A Thursday evening in November, she was driving home from the school where she taught kindergarten, Sawyer in the back seat. A pickup truck ran a red light at the intersection of Grover and 10th. The impact was on the driver's side. Elaine was killed instantly. Sawyer, buckled into his booster seat on the passenger side, was physically unhurt. Not a scratch, not a bruise. The paramedics called it a miracle. But Sawyer, who had been a chatty, giggly, loud little kid, the kind of child who narrated his own life in a running stream of observations and questions and nonsense songs, stopped talking. Just stopped. Like someone had reached inside him and turned off a switch. The doctors said it was selective mutism triggered by psychological trauma. They said it might last weeks, months, maybe a year. They said therapy would help. They said give it time. They said a lot of things. 9 years. Bennett has taken Sawyer to 4 different therapists, 2 speech pathologists, and a child psychologist who specializes in trauma-induced mutism. He's tried play therapy, art therapy, music therapy, equine therapy. He's read every book. He's joined online forums where parents of nonverbal children share strategies and heartbreaks in equal measure. He's done everything a father can do except the one thing he can't do, which is go back in time and put himself in that car instead of Elaine. Sawyer communicates. That's important to understand. He's not locked inside himself. He writes notes in neat handwriting. He draws. God, does he draw. His sketchbooks are conversations, each page a sentence, each drawing a paragraph of meaning that Bennett has learned to read like a second language. Sawyer points, gestures, taps, nods, shakes his head, raises his eyebrows, rolls his eyes like any other kid his age. He laughs silently, his shoulders shaking, his mouth open, no sound coming out. He cries sometimes, the tears running down his face in perfect silence, and those are the moments that nearly break Bennett in half. But he does not speak, has not spoken a single word since November 14th, 9 years ago. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, because this story will remind you that sometimes the people who say the least are the ones with the most to say. And while you're at it, subscribe to Untold Hearts because we're just getting started. Bennett has worked as a groundskeeper at Pemberton Properties for the past 7 years. The corporate campus sits on 12 acres just outside the city, a cluster of glass and steel buildings connected by landscaped walkways, manicured lawns, seasonal flower beds, and a small reflecting pond that freezes in winter and fills with koi in summer. It's the kind of place where everything looks effortless but isn't, where the grass is always the right shade of green, and the hedges are always trimmed to geometric precision. And that's because of Bennett and a 4-person grounds crew who start before dawn and finish after the last executive leaves. His supervisor is a man named Rudy Oakes, a compact, weathered guy in his 60s who has been taking care of this property since before the buildings existed, back when it was just a field and a dream in some developer's head. Rudy doesn't talk much either, which is one of the reasons Bennett likes working for him. They communicate in gestures and nods in the shared language of people who work with their hands. The grounds crew doesn't interact with the corporate employees. That's an unwritten rule. They're supposed to be invisible, working before the suits arrive, finishing the loud jobs by 8 a.m., staying out of the walkways during business hours. Bennett knows the rhythm of the campus the way a stagehand knows the rhythm of a theater. His job is to make everything look perfect without ever being seen doing it. Frederick Pemberton is the founder and CEO of Pemberton Properties, a commercial real estate empire that stretches across 14 states. Bennett has seen him exactly 11 times in 7 years, always from a distance, always getting in or out of the black limousine, always flanked by assistance and urgency. The man moves through the campus like weather. You feel the pressure change when he arrives. Bennett knows things about Frederick Pemberton the way all invisible people know things about the powerful, through observation. He knows that Pemberton arrives between 6:30 and 7 a.m. and leaves between 8 and 10 p.m. He knows that Pemberton walks the east path to the main building, never the west path, even though the west path is shorter. He knows that Pemberton's office is on the top floor of Building 1 and that the light stays on long after every other office goes dark. He knows that Pemberton takes his coffee black because the receptionist, Gloria, mentioned it once in passing. He knows one other thing. 2 months ago, Bennett was trimming the low hedges beneath the ground floor windows of Building 1 when he glanced up and saw Pemberton sitting alone at his desk. The CEO's back was turned to the window. He was holding something small. A photograph, Bennett thought, though he couldn't be sure from the angle. Pemberton held it for a long time, perfectly still, and then he placed it in a drawer and closed it. That was all. But there was something in the gesture that Bennett recognized, the way you recognize your own handwriting in someone else's, the careful handling of grief, the ritual of looking at what you've lost, the discipline of putting it away. Bennett hadn't thought much about Frederick Pemberton before that moment. After it, he thought about him differently, not as a name on a building, as a man with a drawer he opens when no one's watching. Today, though, Sawyer's here, and that changes everything. It's a teacher in-service day, no school, and Bennett's regular backup, his neighbor Mrs. Platt, who watches Sawyer on days like this, slipped on her front steps yesterday and broke her wrist. Bennett called every person he could think of. No one was available. He could have called in sick, but October is the busiest month for grounds work, leaf cleanup, winterization, bulb planting for spring, and Rudy needs every hand. So Bennett brought Sawyer. He packed extra sketchbooks, colored pencils, a thermos of hot cocoa, and a blanket. The plan was simple. Sawyer sits on the bench near the maintenance shed, draws, stays quiet, which, for Sawyer, is not a difficult instruction, and Bennett checks on him every 30 minutes. The plan worked perfectly for exactly 43 minutes. Then, Frederick Pemberton's limousine pulled up to the east entrance, and Sawyer, who had been drawing on the bench, stood up and walked directly into the path of the most powerful man on the campus. Whose child is this? Bennett is standing now, mulch on his knees, clippers in one hand. His heart is hammering. Employees have been terminated for less than this, for leaving a rake where a guest might trip on it, for parking in the wrong section of the lot. Bringing your kid to work is not in the handbook because it doesn't need to be. Everyone knows. He's my son, sir. There wasn't school today and my childcare fell through. I'm sorry. He won't be in the way. Sawyer, come on. Bennett reaches for Sawyer's hand, but the boy doesn't take it. Sawyer's looking up at Frederick Pemberton with that unblinking gaze of his, the one that makes strangers uncomfortable because they expect a child to look away, and Sawyer never does. His sketchbook is open. He turns it so the drawing faces Pemberton. It's the limousine, rendered in pencil with astonishing accuracy, the curve of the fender, the reflections on the hood, the slight lean of the driver waiting by the door. But what makes the drawing remarkable is what's not in it yet. The back door's open, and the space where the passenger should be is empty. White paper, an absence. Pemberton looks at the drawing. His expression shifts. Bennett can't read it exactly, but something behind the gray eyes moves. "He drew this just now?" Pemberton asks. "Yes, sir. He draws a lot. Bennett trails off. He doesn't know how to explain Sawyer to a stranger without reducing him to a condition." "It's good," Pemberton says. The words are clipped but sincere. He looks at Sawyer once more, then at Bennett. "Keep him out of the walkways," and he walks away. That's it. No firing, no reprimand. Just keep him out of the walkways. Bennett exhales. He puts his hand on Sawyer's shoulder. "Bud, you can't just stand in front of people like that, okay?" Sawyer taps the table twice, except there's no table, so he taps Bennett's arm instead. "Yes, I agree. Keep going." But his eyes are still following the silver-haired man as he disappears through the glass doors of Building 1. And when Bennett looks down at the sketchbook, he sees that Sawyer has already turned to a fresh page. His pencil is moving. He's drawing the man's face. Over the next 3 weeks, a pattern develops that Bennett doesn't plan and can't quite explain. Sawyer has school most days, but on the 2 Thursdays when the district runs its half-day schedule, Bennett brings him to work again. And on the Saturday that Bennett comes in for overtime leaf cleanup, Sawyer's there too, bundled in his oversized gray hoodie, sketchbook open, sitting on the same bench near the east entrance. Each time, Sawyer draws. He draws the campus, the buildings, the reflecting pond, the way the morning light hits the glass at certain angles. He draws the grounds crew, Rudy with his cap pulled low, the new guy whose name Bennett can never remember adjusting the sprinkler heads, Bennett himself, seen from behind, kneeling in dirt. But mostly he draws Frederick Pemberton. He draws Pemberton getting out of the limousine, Pemberton walking up the east path with his phone pressed to his ear, Pemberton standing at the ground floor window of Building 1, hands clasped behind his back, looking at something in the distance. Each drawing is more detailed than the last, as if Sawyer is refining his understanding of this man with every pass of the pencil. The 3rd Thursday, something shifts. Bennett is raking leaves near the maintenance shed when Rudy walks over, hands in his jacket pockets, breath visible in the cold air. "Your boy left something at the east entrance again," Rudy says. "Left something?" "One of his drawings, tucked under the planter by the door. Gloria found it." Bennett's stomach drops. "I'll talk to him." "Don't." Rudy pauses, chews the inside of his cheek the way he does when he's working something out. "Gloria showed it to Pemberton's assistant. The assistant showed it to Pemberton." "Oh, God." "Relax. Pemberton kept it. Didn't say a word about it, but he kept it. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to share it and subscribe to Untold Hearts, because sometimes the smallest voice carries the farthest. Share this with someone who needs to hear it." Bennett tries to stop it. He tells Sawyer, gently and then firmly, that he can't leave drawings around the campus, that this is Dad's workplace, that the man in the suit is not someone they know. Sawyer listens to all of this with his usual attentive stillness, and then, on the next half-day Thursday, leaves another drawing tucked under the east entrance planter. This time, it's not of Pemberton. Gloria, the receptionist, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the kind of warmth that makes people tell her things they shouldn't, describes it to Bennett later, in the break room, while Bennett stares at his coffee and tries to figure out what his son is doing. "It was a drawing of a girl," Gloria says. "A young woman, actually. Long dark hair, dark eyes, beautiful, very detailed. She was sitting on a park bench reading a book, and behind her there was a man watching from a distance. You could only see the man's silhouette, but the posture was..." She trails off. "It looked like Mr. Pemberton." Bennett feels something cold settle in his chest. How would Sawyer know to draw that? That's what I wondered, because the thing is, honey, and I'm only telling you this because you should know, there's a photograph on Mr. Pemberton's desk. It's in a silver frame, and it's of a young woman who looks exactly like the girl in your son's drawing. Mr. Pemberton never talks about her. His assistant told me once, years ago, that it's his daughter. They haven't spoken in over a decade. Bennett stares at Gloria. "Sawyer saw that photograph through the window." "Your boy sees everything, doesn't he?" Bennett doesn't answer, because the truth is something he's known for years but never quite said aloud. Sawyer's silence isn't just the absence of speech. It's the presence of something else. The boy absorbs the world at a frequency that speaking people can't access. He sees the things that noise covers up, the grief hidden behind posture, the loneliness behind a closed door, the shape of what someone has lost. It scares Bennett sometimes. It awes him every single day. Before he was a groundskeeper, Bennett Hartwell was a music teacher. Not just any music teacher. He was the choir director at Whitfield High School, a public school in a blue-collar neighborhood where the football team got new helmets every year and the music program got whatever was left. Bennett took that program, 12 kids, 3 working microphones, and a piano with a dead middle C, and turned it into something that made people stop and listen. He had the gift. That's what his own teacher, Mrs. Adler, had told him when he was 14 and playing Chopin on a second-hand upright piano in her living room. Bennett, you have the gift. Don't waste it. He didn't waste it. He earned a music scholarship to Eastman, studied piano performance and choral conducting, graduated near the top of his class. He had offers, real offers, from conservatories, from performance companies, from a conductor in Vienna who had heard him play at a student showcase and said in heavily accented English, "You belong on a stage." Bennett chose the classroom instead, not because he wasn't good enough for the stage, he was, but because the classroom was where the music mattered most. He'd seen what music did for kids who had nothing else, kids whose homes were chaos and whose futures were uncertain. Music gave them structure, discipline, beauty, a reason to show up on Monday morning. Bennett wanted to be the person who unlocked that. Elaine understood. She was a kindergarten teacher at the elementary school 2 blocks from Whitfield. They met at a district professional development seminar, the kind of day-long event where teachers sit in folding chairs and pretend to take notes. Bennett was doodling musical notation in the margins of his handout. Elaine leaned over and whispered, "Is that Debussy?" And that was it. 4 months later, they were engaged. A year after that, married. 2 years after that, Sawyer. Sawyer came into the world screaming, a full-throated, lung-emptying howl that the nurses laughed about, and Bennett recorded on his phone. The first sound his son ever made. Bennett played it back sometimes, in the early years, marveling at the sheer volume of it, the insistence of it, the way it announced to the entire maternity ward that this small person had arrived and intended to be heard. Elaine used to sing to Sawyer every night. She wasn't trained. Her voice was thin and sometimes off-pitch in the way that made it more beautiful, not less. And she'd sit on the edge of his bed and sing Moon River, or Somewhere Over the Rainbow, or sometimes just hum something she'd made up, a melody that wandered and repeated and eventually dissolved into sleep. When Elaine died, the music stopped. Not just for Sawyer, for Bennett too. He hasn't played the piano since the funeral, hasn't sung, hasn't hummed. The upright piano that used to sit in their living room, a Baldwin from 1972 with a warm, woody tone that Bennett loved, is in a storage unit on the east side of the city. He pays $47 a month to keep it there. He hasn't visited it in 6 years. He quit teaching 3 months after the accident, couldn't stand in front of a classroom full of kids and ask them to sing when his own son couldn't. The hypocrisy of it. The cruelty of standing at a piano, coaxing sound from an instrument, while the person he loved most in the world sat in silence. Rudy hired him 6 months later. Bennett had applied for every outdoor job he could find, anything that didn't involve being inside, being watched, being expected to perform. Groundskeeping was perfect. Quiet work, physical work, work that left his hands sore and his mind too tired to wander, work that let him be invisible in exactly the way he needed to be. But the music is still there. Bennett knows this the way an amputee knows the phantom limb. He hears harmonies in traffic noise. He counts beats in the rhythm of his rake. When the wind moves through the trees on the Pemberton campus, he hears it in key D minor today, he thinks, the saddest of all keys, and his fingers move involuntarily, pressing invisible keys against his thigh. He never tells Sawyer about this. He worries that his silence, his chosen silence, might seem like an accusation, like he's saying, "You don't speak, so I don't play." That's not it at all. The truth is simpler and harder. Bennett stopped because the music reminded him of Elaine, and the Elaine-shaped hole in his life is not something he can fill with sound. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button right now. It's free, takes a second, and helps untold hearts reach more people who need to hear stories like this. Now, back to the story. The drawings keep appearing. By the end of November, there have been 7. Gloria keeps a list. Each one is tucked under the same planter by the east entrance, each one found by the same maintenance worker on the morning shift, each one delivered to Gloria's desk, and each one, every single one, taken by Frederick Pemberton and placed somewhere in his office. The 7th drawing is the one that changes everything. It's larger than the others. Sawyer has used a full sheet of sketch paper, not a page torn from his book. The drawing shows 2 figures, a tall man with silver-white hair standing at a window, his reflection visible in the glass, and behind him, barely visible in the reflected image, the outline of a young woman. The young woman's hand is raised as if she's reaching toward him. The man's hands are at his sides. The detail is extraordinary. Sawyer has captured the weave of the suit fabric, the grain of the wood windowsill, the way the outdoor light bleeds through the glass and mixes with the indoor fluorescence. But it's the emotional architecture that makes the drawing devastating. The distance between the 2 figures, the unfinished gesture of the young woman's hand, the fact that the man is looking out the window and not at her reflection behind him. Gloria tells Bennett about this drawing with tears in her eyes. "Honey, I don't know how your boy knows what he knows, but that drawing, it's Mr. Pemberton and his daughter. And it's the truest thing I've ever seen." Bennett goes home that night and sits at the kitchen table after Sawyer is asleep. He opens the latest sketchbook and flips through the pages. He's looking for something, though he's not sure what. Evidence, maybe. Understanding. What he finds is a story told in pictures. Sawyer has been watching Frederick Pemberton the way he watches everything, completely, relentlessly, without the filter of social expectation that tells most people when to look away. He's drawn Pemberton from every angle. Arriving, departing, sitting, standing, on the phone, off the phone, alone. And in every drawing, Sawyer has included something that a camera wouldn't capture. The weight of the man's shoulders, the way his hand lingers on a doorknob as if he's reluctant to enter, the slight forward lean of someone searching for something they can't name. Sawyer has seen the loneliness inside Frederick Pemberton, and he's been drawing it, week after week, because drawing is how Sawyer speaks. Bennett closes the sketchbook. He sits in the dark kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a siren, and he thinks about 2 kinds of silence, the kind that's chosen and the kind that chooses you. His son lives in the second kind. He has lived in the first. He wonders, not for the first time, whether they're more different than he thinks. On the first Monday of December, Bennett is called into Rudy's office. Rudy's office is a converted storage room in the maintenance building. Cinderblock walls, a metal desk, a space heater that smells like burnt dust. There's a calendar on the wall that's still showing September. Rudy is sitting behind the desk with his arms crossed. "Close the door," Rudy says. Bennett closes it. His stomach is tight. He knows what this is about. "Pemberton's assistant called me this morning," Rudy says. "Pemberton wants to meet the father of the boy who's been leaving drawings." Bennett swallows. Am I being let go?" Rudy looks at him for a long moment. "No, you idiot. He wants to meet you tomorrow morning, his office, 7:15 a.m. A pause. "Bring the boy." The elevator to the top floor of Building 1 takes 23 seconds. Bennett counts them. Sawyer stands beside him, sketchbook under his arm, wearing his cleanest hoodie, the gray one without the stain on the cuff. Bennett is wearing khakis and a button-down shirt he ironed at 5 a.m. He hasn't worn this shirt since a parent-teacher conference 3 years ago. The doors open onto a hallway that smells like money. Clean leather, fresh coffee, something floral that probably has a name Bennett doesn't know. The carpet is so thick his work boots leave no prints. Gloria is there. She smiles when she sees them. "Come with me, boys." She leads them past a series of glass-walled offices to a set of double doors at the end of the hall. She knocks once, opens the door, and gestures them inside. Frederick Pemberton's office is enormous. One entire wall is glass, overlooking the campus and the woods beyond. The desk is dark walnut, large enough to land a small plane on, and nearly empty. A laptop, a phone, a single silver frame turned at an angle that Bennett can't quite see from where he's standing. Pemberton is standing by the window. He turns when they enter. His face is composed, controlled, the face of a man who runs 14 states' worth of real estate from this room. But his eyes, his gray eyes, flick to Sawyer and something in them cracks, just slightly, like a pane of glass with a single fracture running through it. "Sit down, please," Pemberton says. They sit. Sawyer perches on the edge of a leather chair that's too big for him, his sneakers dangling above the floor. His sketchbook is in his lap. His eyes are moving around the room, recording everything. Bennett notices the boy's gaze land on the silver frame on the desk. From this angle, he can see it now. A photograph of a young woman with long, dark hair and dark eyes, smiling in a way that looks practiced. She's wearing a graduation gown. Sawyer stares at the photo, then he opens his sketchbook. "Mr. Hartwell," Pemberton begins, "I asked you here because your son—" He pauses, looks at Sawyer, starts again. "The drawings. They've been arriving at the east entrance for several weeks." "Yes, sir. I've spoken to him about it. I know it's not appropriate, and I'm not here to discuss appropriateness." Pemberton's voice is even, measured, the voice of a man who has spent his life controlling rooms. But there's a tremor underneath it, barely perceptible, like a bass note vibrating beneath the melody. "I'm here because your son drew something that no one, not my assistant, not my therapist, not anyone in my life, has ever shown me before." Bennett doesn't know what to say. Beside him, Sawyer's pencil's moving across the page. "That drawing of the girl in the window," Pemberton says quietly. "That's my daughter, Colette. We haven't spoken in 12 years. He pauses. "Your son saw a photograph on my desk from 40 yards away through a ground floor window and drew her from memory. But that's not what stopped me. What stopped me is that he drew her reaching for me. And he drew me, not seeing her." The room is silent. Bennett can hear the tick of a clock somewhere. "He sees things," Bennett says finally. "He doesn't talk, but he sees everything." "Why doesn't he talk?" Bennett hesitates. He has answered this question from doctors, therapists, teachers, strangers, well-meaning neighbors, kids at school. The answer is always the same, and it never gets easier. He was in the car when his mother died. He hasn't spoken since. Pemberton sits very still. His hands are flat on the desk. "How long ago?" 9 years. The clock ticks. Outside, through the glass wall, a crow lands on the railing of the reflecting pond. Sawyer's pencil scratches softly. "I lost my daughter too," Pemberton says, and his voice is different now. Not the CEO voice, not the boardroom voice, but something underneath, something rusted and unused. "Not to death, to my own failures. She was 17 when her mother was diagnosed, ovarian cancer. I was here. I was always here." He gestures at the office, the campus, the empire. "I told myself the business was how I took care of them, that the money was the point. I missed the treatments. I missed the conversations. I missed the last 6 months." He pauses. "I made it to the funeral. I gave the eulogy. And afterward, Colette looked at me and said, 'You were never there, and giving a speech doesn't change that.' She left for college the next week. She hasn't answered my calls since." Bennett sits with this. He feels the weight of it. 2 men, 2 different kinds of loss, sitting across from each other in an office that overlooks the grounds Bennett has tended for 7 years without once setting foot inside this room. "Your son sees the things people hide," Pemberton says. "I don't know how. I don't know why. But those drawings, they're the first time in 12 years that someone has shown me what I actually look like. Not the suit, not the company, the man underneath. If Untold Hearts has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below, and hit that like button if you haven't already." Now, back to the story. After that meeting, things change. Not in the ways Bennett expects. Pemberton doesn't offer him a promotion or a raise or any of the grand gestures that billionaires make in movies. What he does is simpler, and in its own way, more profound. He asks if Sawyer can come to the campus once a week, not to work, not as charity, but to draw. Pemberton arranges for Sawyer to use a small conference room on the ground floor of Building 1, a room with good natural light and a view of the reflecting pond. He stocks it with art supplies, sketch pads, professional-grade pencils, charcoal, pastels, watercolors. He doesn't make a show of it. He tells Gloria. Gloria tells Bennett, and the next Thursday, Sawyer walks into the room, sees the supplies laid out on the table, and stops in the doorway. Bennett watches his son's face. The boy's eyes are wide. His lips are slightly parted. His fingers, thin, ink-stained, always moving, reach for a set of Prismacolor pencils arranged in a wooden case, 72 colors, each one pristine. Sawyer looks at Bennett. His eyes are asking a question. "They're yours, bud. All of it." Sawyer sits down at the table. He opens a fresh sketch pad. And for the next 3 hours, he draws without stopping, his hand moving with a certainty and a fluency that takes Bennett's breath away. It's like watching someone finally speak after years of enforced silence, except it isn't speech. It's something parallel to speech, something that runs alongside language, but operates in a different register entirely. Every Thursday and every other Saturday, Sawyer comes to the conference room. Pemberton never visits while the boy is drawing. That's a boundary that Bennett appreciates. But on Friday mornings, Gloria tells Bennett the CEO walks into the conference room and stands in front of whatever Sawyer has left on the table, sometimes for 20 minutes. He doesn't touch the drawings, he just looks. The first Friday, Gloria says, Pemberton stood in front of a charcoal sketch of the reflecting pond at dusk, the water dark, the koi invisible beneath the surface, but the ripples where they'd been still faintly visible, and he said to no one, "The boy draws what's underneath." Gloria was arranging flowers in the hallway. She pretended not to hear. The second Friday, it was a drawing of the maintenance shed. Not the kind of drawing anyone else would make of a shed, not an architectural rendering or a landscape study. Sawyer had drawn it from the inside, looking out through the open door, and the contrast between the warm clutter of the interior and the cold open expanse of the campus outside was so precisely observed that Pemberton asked Gloria, "Has the boy been inside the shed?" Gloria said she didn't think so. Pemberton looked at the drawing again and said, "Then how does he know what it feels like to be in there?" The third Friday was the drawing of Gloria herself. At her desk, reading glasses on the tip of her nose, one hand on her phone, the other holding a pen she's chewing. And Gloria told Bennett she had to excuse herself to the bathroom because she'd never seen herself the way that boy saw her, and it was the kindest mirror she'd ever looked into. Pemberton started keeping the drawings. He had his assistant buy archival quality folders, the kind museums use. Each drawing was placed in its own sleeve, dated, and stored in a cabinet in his office. He never asked permission. He never offered payment. He simply collected them the way someone collects letters from a person they're trying to understand. Sawyer draws the campus in every season and every light. He draws the grounds crew, the executives, the delivery drivers, the mailman. He draws Rudy leaning against the maintenance shed, arms crossed, cap low, looking at the sky the way farmers do. And he keeps drawing Frederick Pemberton. But the drawings change. In the early ones, Pemberton was always alone, a solitary figure in a suit, seen from outside, through glass at a distance. In the new drawings, the glass is gone. Sawyer draws Pemberton close up, the lines on his face, the slight asymmetry of his eyes, the way his left hand closes into a loose fist when he's thinking. These are intimate drawings, the kind that require not just observation, but understanding. The most striking change is the young woman, Colette. In the early drawings, she existed only as a reflection, a ghost behind glass. But gradually, drawing by drawing, Sawyer brings her forward, her reflection sharpens, her hand, which was once just an outline, gains detail, fingers, a bracelet, the ridge of a knuckle. She's becoming real. Sawyer is drawing her into existence for a man who has lost her. Bennett doesn't fully understand what his son is doing, but he recognizes the impulse. It's the same impulse that made him write notes in Sawyer's lunchbox for 9 years, the same impulse that kept the piano in storage instead of selling it, the refusal to let go of a connection even when the other person can't hear you. The Pemberton Foundation Winter Gala is held on the third Saturday in December. It's the biggest event of the year. 500 guests, a live orchestra, a silent auction, a ballroom in the main building transformed with white lights and evergreen garlands. The campus is lit like something from a dream, every pathway lined with luminaries, the reflecting pond strung with lights that shimmer on the frozen surface. Bennett is working the event. The grounds crew has been preparing for 2 weeks, stringing lights, clearing pathways, setting up outdoor heaters for the valet area. Bennett has been here since 5 a.m. and his back aches from hauling sandbags to weigh down the tent anchors against the December wind. His hands are raw from the cold even through his work gloves. He's stationed near the east entrance, making sure the walkway stays clear of ice, spreading salt from a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He watches the guests arrive, men in dark overcoats, women in furs and cashmere, all of them stepping from cars that cost more than Bennett's annual salary. He knows none of their names. They don't know his. He's infrastructure again, the way he is every day, the person who keeps the world smooth and safe beneath their feet without ever being acknowledged for it. Tonight, though, there's something else in the air, a charge that Bennett can feel in his chest. He doesn't know what it is yet. He's in his green jacket, work boots, a knit cap Sawyer made him at school, lopsided, too tight, with a pom-pom that's already unraveling. It's the warmest thing he owns, not because of the yarn, because of the hands that made it. Sawyer's supposed to be at Mrs. Platt's, but Mrs. Platt calls at 4:30 p.m. with a fever of 102 and an apology that Bennett assures her is unnecessary. He tries 3 other people. No one is available. It's Saturday night in December. Everyone has plans, so Sawyer's here. Again, sitting on a folding chair in the maintenance building with his sketchbook and a thermos of tomato soup. Bennett has told him to stay put. Sawyer tapped twice. Yes, I agree. The gala begins at 7 p.m. By 8 p.m., the ballroom is full. Bennett can hear the music through the walls, a string quartet playing something elegant and restrained. He's salting the walkway when Gloria comes outside, coat over her gown, heels clicking on the pavement. Bennett, you should come in. I'm working, Gloria. Pemberton's giving a speech, the annual one. He gives it every year, and every year it's about numbers and growth and shareholder value, and everyone claps and goes back to their shrimp cocktail. She pauses. This year's different. He's talking about his daughter. Bennett stands up slowly. He looks toward the maintenance building where Sawyer's supposed to be. The chair's empty. The thermos is on the ground. The sketchbook is gone. Bennett's heart seizes. He finds Sawyer inside the building. The boy has walked through the service entrance, the same door Bennett uses every morning, and navigated the back hallways by memory, because of course he has, because Sawyer has been on this campus enough times to know its skeleton. He's standing at the back of the ballroom, half hidden behind a pillar, watching. 500 people in evening wear, crystal chandeliers, a stage at the front with a podium and a microphone. And behind the podium, Frederick Pemberton, silver-white hair catching the light, navy suit exchanged for a black tuxedo, speaking into the microphone with a voice that carries but does not boom. And I want to say something tonight that I have never said publicly, because it's not the kind of thing that appears in annual reports or shareholder letters. The room is quiet. People are holding champagne flutes, mid-sip. I have a daughter. Her name is Colette. She's 30 years old. She's a teacher, an English teacher at a high school in Portland. She has her mother's eyes, and I'm told her mother's laugh. I say, I'm told, because I haven't heard that laugh in 12 years. A murmur moves through the crowd like wind through tall grass. I wasn't there for her when it mattered. I was here. I was building this. He gestures at the ballroom, the campus, the empire. And I told myself that this was enough, that providing was the same as being present. It isn't. I know that now. I know it because a boy who has never spoken a word in my presence, a boy who communicates entirely through drawings, showed me what I look like to the people I've failed. Bennett is frozen at the edge of the ballroom. He can see Sawyer standing by the pillar. The boy's sketchbook is open. His pencil is not moving. He's listening. I don't know if Colette will ever speak to me again, Pemberton says, but I want her to know, I want everyone to know, that I am not too proud to say I was wrong, and I am not too old to change. The applause is immediate, but Bennett barely hears it, because Sawyer's moving. The boy steps out from behind the pillar. He walks between the tables, between the evening gowns and the tuxedos, past the champagne and the centerpieces and the silent auction items. He walks with his sketchbook pressed against his chest, his sandy brown hair falling over his forehead, his gray hoodie a stark contrast to every other piece of clothing in the room. People turn to look. A few whisper. One woman reaches for his arm and Sawyer sidesteps her without looking. He walks directly to the stage. Bennett takes a step forward. Every instinct in his body is screaming to grab his son, to protect him from the 500 pairs of eyes now locked onto a boy in a hoodie walking toward a billionaire. But something holds him in place. Something tells him that this is not his moment. This is Sawyer's. Sawyer reaches the stage. He doesn't climb the steps. He stands at the base, looking up at Frederick Pemberton, and he holds out his sketchbook. Pemberton looks down. His face is, Bennett will remember this for the rest of his life. His face is the face of a man who has been struck by something he didn't see coming, something that arrived from a direction he wasn't guarding. "Son," Pemberton says softly. The microphone picks it up. 500 people hear it. Sawyer opens the sketchbook to the last page. He turns it so Pemberton can see. Bennett is too far away to see the drawing, but he sees Pemberton's reaction. The man takes a half step back. His hand goes to the podium for balance. His jaw tightens. His eyes fill. And then Sawyer does something he hasn't done in 9 years. He leans forward, raises himself onto his toes, and he whispers. The microphone doesn't catch it. 500 people see the boy's lips move but hear nothing. Only Pemberton hears. Whatever the boy says, it takes approximately 3 seconds, 3 words, maybe 4. A sentence that fits in the palm of a hand. Frederick Pemberton, billionaire, founder of a 14-state real estate empire, a man who has controlled rooms and markets and negotiations for 30 years, sinks to his knees on the stage. He sinks to his knees, and he puts his hands over his face, and his shoulders begin to shake. Sawyer stands there, patient, still. He reaches out and places his small hand on the top of the man's silver-white hair. The ballroom is absolutely silent. 500 people, not breathing. Bennett is crying. He doesn't know when he started. Later, much later, after the gala has ended and the guests have gone and the lights have been dimmed, Pemberton tells Bennett what Sawyer whispered. They're sitting in the conference room, the one with the good light, the one full of art supplies. Sawyer's asleep on 2 chairs pushed together, a suit jacket someone gave him draped over his thin body like a blanket. His sketchbook is still clutched in his hands. Pemberton's eyes are red. His tuxedo jacket is off, his bow tie undone, his sleeves rolled to the elbows. He looks, for the first time since Bennett has known him, like a human being instead of an institution. The drawing, Pemberton says. The last one. It was Colette and me, not from a photograph. From imagination, I think. She was older in the drawing, older than the photo on my desk, closer to what she'd look like now, and we were sitting together on a bench, a park bench, and she was leaning her head on my shoulder, and I was holding her hand. Pemberton stops. He presses his fist against his mouth, and the boy, your son, he looked up at me and he whispered. Pemberton's voice breaks. He tries again. He said, "She misses you too." Bennett sits with this. 4 words. 9 years of silence broken by 4 words that weren't even about Sawyer's own pain. 4 words given to a stranger because a boy who sees everything saw a father who had lost his daughter and could not find his way back. How did he know? Pemberton asks. How could he possibly know? Bennett thinks about this for a long time. He thinks about the drawings, about the way Sawyer's eyes move across a room, about the sketchbook pages that are really conversations, about the notes in the lunchbox, about the shoebox under the bed, about the taps, 1 for no, 2 for yes, 3 for I love you. He knows, Bennett says slowly, because he lives in the silence between people. He sees what we say when we're not talking. He's been doing it his whole life. His whole life, Pemberton repeats, since his mother died, since the silence started. He stopped talking, but he didn't stop listening. He didn't stop seeing. Bennett looks at his sleeping son. I think silence taught him a language the rest of us forgot. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that the most powerful words are sometimes whispered, please share it. Subscribe to Untold Hearts for more stories, proving that the people who say the least often see the most. Tell us in the comments, has a child ever said something to you that changed your life? 8 months later. Sawyer Hartwell has spoken 41 words. Bennett keeps count, not because the number matters, but because each word is a miracle he refuses to take for granted. The first word, the real first word, not counting the whisper at the gala, came 2 weeks after that night. They were sitting at the kitchen table, eating breakfast, and Bennett was talking about the cardinals nesting in the hedge by the maintenance shed. Sawyer was drawing, and then, without looking up, the boy said, "Red." Just that. Red. 1 syllable, 1 color. Spoken in a voice that was rusty and thin and the most beautiful sound Bennett Hartwell had ever heard. Bennett didn't react. He wanted to leap across the table and hold his son and weep and call every person he'd ever met, but some instinct told him that making a spectacle of it would close the door that had just cracked open. So he said, "Yeah, bud. Bright red. The male ones are show-offs." And Sawyer almost smiled, his lips twitched at the corners, and went back to drawing. The words come slowly after that. Not in conversation, not yet. They come in fragments, in single words attached to the world like labels. Rain when it's raining. Good when breakfast is particularly good. Dad when Bennett is about to leave the room and Sawyer wants him to stay. The speech therapist, Dr. Anwar, a patient, gentle woman with a quiet office on Elm Street, says this is remarkable progress. She says the whisper at the gala was a breakthrough event, a moment when the emotional need to speak overwhelmed the traumatic silence. She says the subsequent words are evidence that the neural pathways for speech were never destroyed, only dormant. She says this with clinical precision, but her eyes are bright and her hands are shaking slightly because in 15 years of practice, she has never seen anything quite like this. Pemberton pays for the therapy. He does this quietly, through a trust set up by his assistant, and when Bennett tries to refuse, Pemberton says, "Your son gave me my daughter back. Let me do this." Because that's the other thing that happened. Pemberton called Colette the night of the gala. She didn't answer. He called again the next morning, and the next. On the fourth day, she texted, "I'm listening." He wrote her a letter, not an email, a letter, handwritten on the personal stationery he hasn't used in 20 years. And he told her everything, about the drawings, about the boy, about the whisper, about kneeling on a stage in front of 500 people because 4 words from a child dismantled the fortress he'd spent 12 years building around his guilt. Colette flew home for Christmas. Bennett knows this because Gloria told him, and Gloria knows everything. The reunion was private, Pemberton's house, just the two of them. And Bennett doesn't know the details except that Pemberton came into the office the Monday after Christmas and looked like a different man. Not younger. Not happier exactly. Lighter. Like something had been set down that he'd been carrying for so long, he'd forgotten what his back felt like without it. Colette now visits once a month. She's met Sawyer. She brought him a set of Japanese calligraphy brushes, the expensive kind with bamboo handles and natural hair bristles, and Sawyer sat cross-legged on the conference room floor and painted for 2 hours straight, and when he was done, he held up the painting and it was the character for voice in Japanese, which Colette told him means both sound and the thing inside you that wants to be heard. Bennett still works the grounds. Pemberton offered him other positions, office jobs, administrative roles, a salaried position as campus coordinator, and Bennett declined each one with the same quiet firmness he uses for everything. "I like working outside," he told Pemberton. "I like being close to the dirt." And Pemberton, who was learning what it means to listen, accepted this. But there's something new in Bennett's life, something he didn't expect. On the 3rd Thursday in April, Bennett went to the storage unit on the east side of the city. He hadn't been there in 6 years. The lock was rusted. He had to buy a can of WD-40 from the hardware store next door. The unit smelled like dust and old paper and the faintest trace of lemon polish. The Baldwin piano was exactly where he'd left it. The bench was still tucked under the keys. He sat down. He opened the lid. He pressed a key, middle C, the one that had always rung a little brighter than the others on this particular instrument, and the note filled the storage unit like a living thing, resonating off the metal walls, vibrating in his chest. He played. For the first time in 9 years, he played Debussy, the piece Elaine had recognized at that seminar a lifetime ago, Clair de Lune, moonlight music, the sound of water and memory and things that are beautiful because they don't last. He played it badly. His fingers were stiff, his timing was off, he missed notes he used to hit in his sleep. But he played. And when he finished, he sat with his hands on the keys and his eyes closed, and something that had been locked inside his ribcage for 9 years released its grip. The piano's in the apartment now. It sits against the wall where the television used to be. Bennett plays it every evening after dinner, scales first, then exercises, then whatever his hands remember. Sawyer sits on the bench beside him sometimes, not drawing, just listening. his thin body leaning against his father's arm. Last Tuesday, Sawyer said a full sentence, 7 words, the longest string of speech he's produced in 9 years. They were sitting at the piano. Bennett was playing Moon River, Elaine's song, the one she used to sing at bedtime. And he was playing it slowly, tentatively, the way you approach something sacred. And Sawyer, sitting beside him, his brown eyes on the keys, opened his mouth and said, in a voice that was small and rough and absolutely certain, "That's the song Mom used to sing." Bennett stopped playing. He looked at his son. Sawyer looked back. And then the boy leaned his head against his father's shoulder, the same gesture he'd drawn in that final sketch of Pemberton and Colette, and Bennett put his arm around him and held on. Outside, the evening light was fading. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ghost of a melody still hanging in the air. And then Bennett, very softly, began to sing.